Thank you very much, D-Man, and what a game it was. I want to go all the way back to the picks and bans phase because we discussed it quite immensely. I was personally very surprised by the Kassadin first pick. I actually said the words, they won't first pick Kassadin, and then it got locked in. I was like, that's brave. I was like, I wasn't expecting it. And then following on from there, the picks in specific orders, they stood out for us, but we definitely felt Fnatic had a stronger team comp. What do you think, Monty?
I mean, I found the pick and ban phase falling heavily into Fnatic's favor here. I mean, when we see all of the bans that came out, I have to admit I'm a little surprised by the Orianna ban that came from Cloud9. But when banning Ahri themselves, it really opens up that Kassadin pick, and it revealed Hai's weaknesses. He's never played Gragas before in the LCS, and now it comes in this first game. And due to factors in the game as well, he got pretty screwed over in the laning phase, and we'll go into that just a little bit later. But with the kind of general lack of damage coming out of Cloud9's composition, they had to play their picks perfectly, which they've been able to do to their credit in the LCS, setting up things beautifully with the Ash Arrow and chaining CC very nicely. But there's just no way you can lock down this Kassadin, Corki, Lissandra combo effectively, especially with somebody as skilled as Xpeke rift walking over absolutely everything.
The biggest reason that I was so surprised at the Ahri ban is because Peke first picked Kassadin because everything else was out. But in Europe, the mid-meta game actually gives advantage to purple side teams because they always pick their mid lane last, and that's why I'm so surprised that they ban Ahri. Why would you ban Ahri? Because if Fnatic picks Ahri, then Cloud9 just counters with Kassadin. And it's really simple. Like you should never ban a mid laner if you can counter it with Kassadin in the last pick.
Well, let's take this into the game a little bit. And I know that during the course of it, we've seen some unique items. I think Lemonation picked himself up the Doran Shield, the Mana Manipulator. We've seen Corki going Sorcerer's Shoes. Double F, what was your thoughts on some of the items?
So Lemonation's late Sidestone because he rushed Mana Manipulator Doran's Shield for lane is actually just really disrespectful of Fnatic. He almost doesn't care about Cyanide's ganks, and he's just like, if we're going to get teleported on, we're going to get teleported on. It's really surprising that without a Sidestone early, they were able to pick up the first 2 dragons. That's really bold of Cloud9 to just force that without very much vision. And another thing is, I don't like the Sorc shoes from Corki at all. Despite Pushu winning, I feel like he needs to make a small adjustment with his choice of boots because he's up against Shen with CC, Elise, Ashe, Sona, and the burst damage from Gragas. If he wasn't so far ahead, after Fnatic turned the game around, he would have just immediately gotten CC'd and bursted as Corki.
Banshee's Veil was a really good pickup for him though in the late game.
Yep.
Yeah. So actually I want to touch on what you talked about Doublelift with picking up the dragons and whatnot, because I started paying a lot of attention to what the teams were doing to secure objectives. And what Cloud9 had done is basically Hai bursted down the Kassadin. Teleport was already on cooldown. He's just spent all his cooldowns to make Peke go back to lane, or to go back to base, and right then they had already rotated the duo lane down, and they had a 5-on-4 at Dragon and secured it. And then the second time around, a very similar situation where they had people isolated on the other side of the map, and Cloud9 got to Dragon first, regardless of ward control. And now I know you'd been talking about different jungle styles and whatnot. You were alluding to it in the mid lane getting behind. And some of that is Meteos being 3 levels up on Cyanide the entire mid game. You've got 75 more damage on your smite, and he's able to secure buffs a lot better that way.
Until they start fighting. That's the biggest difference. It swung around when Fnatic started winning fights, and then Cyanide just got those entire 3 levels back.
Let's unpack this a little more because the jungle style really affected the mid-game play here. And yes, Hai got chunked a bit on Gragas early, so he was already behind. But then Meteos repeatedly taking the blues, taking all that experience, did give him that 10-7 level advantage. But by having the blues on Xpeke, he was able to keep ahead of Gragas in farm, and then it really played out, I think, by the time we got to these team fights where, yes, Meteos was very tanky. Yes, Meteos had the lock at first, but Xpeke got enormous.
Yeah, I think it's just a difference in styles, though, because you're absolutely right that Peke did a freaking ton this game. But when you look at the 3-3 battle, the second or third dragon, I believe it was, where they went 3 for 3, Meteos more or less carried that fight. Whereas Cyanide got chunked and had to leave, you actually had an extra damage threat on the Cloud9 squad because they more or less donated farm to the junglers. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable and fairly well-utilized style here for Cloud9. I don't want to count it out right now.
I want to ask a question as well, talking about the styles and talking about the differences in approaches, because as the game rolled forward, we did see, Fnatic fell a little bit behind, and they clawed it back. They were able to basically make Cloud9 get caught out of position, and then they rush some towers down. Is that more of Cloud9 not being aware of Fnatic's movements, or was that Fnatic making the right moves?
It's just really nice to see how Fnatic can capitalize once they get a small lead. They won I think, Dragon fight, and then they transitioned from Dragon into mid lane, and they just hit in the brushes, and they caught back up. What you have to note as well is regarding gold in both sides. Yes, Cloud9 could have a gold lead, but Fnatic does so much more with gold. Their damage per gold value is so much higher in this composition. Yeah. Cloud9 entirely relies on CC stacking and then killing them with the limited damage. But if Fnatic ramps up into late game and they get unkillable with that CC train, they just win.
Also, it's just so hard to make rotations against Fnatic in general, but especially a Fnatic playing Kassadin, right? Because if you don't have that vision, you have to play scared at all times. So.
Well, guys, we do have to jump to a very quick break. When we return, Fnatic will be trying to make it a clean sweep of Cloud9 and teleport into those semifinals. Plus, Fnatic's manager, Harry Wiggett, will join us to talk about his team's impressive first game. Don't go anywhere. League of Legends Season 3 World Championships. We'll be right back.